Welcome to another episode of Stuck in My Mind podcast. I am your host, WIZE. And today, my next guest, Jack Kammer, is a bold voice in the often muted conversation about men, masculinity, and social justice. A seasoned social worker, former correctional officer, radio host, and author, Jack has dedicated his career to elevating the dialogue around male social issues, especially in systems that rarely acknowledge them. From walking the tiers of Baltimore's toughest prison to advocating for fatherhood programs inside correctional facilities, Jack's mission has remained the same: help men give and get all the love they can. Through his consultancy, working well with men, and his provocative books, including the cult favorite "If Men Have All the Power, How Come Women Make the Rules?" Jack isn't afraid to challenge the status quo, provoke thought, and call out double standards in a space desperate for nuance. Welcome to the show, Jack Kammer.
Thank you,
Hello.
Mr. Thank you, Wise. Appreciate the introduction.
I appreciate you being a guest, man. So, what motivated you to join the field of social work after working in corrections?
Well, I joined the field of social work before I
Oh,
got into the field of corrections. After I got my master's in social work, I was hoping to find a job at a program that would involve social policy. No such job was forthcoming, at least not for a person like me who wanted to sort of try to change social policy towards men and boys. So the only job I could find that would at least keep me in touch with what was really going on with men, and in this case, men not at the top of the pyramid, but at the bottom, was as a correctional officer in the Baltimore City Jail.
awesome. How did your time as a correctional officer shift your view on men and the systems around them?
Well, in the jail, I didn't get a whole lot of time to interact a lot with the detainees. This was a jail, not a prison. So these fellows were technically innocent until proven guilty. And of course, there are no guilty people in jail. You know, at least that's what they will tell you. So the real place I got to interact with men who were in trouble with the social justice system, sometimes called the social injustice system, was when I left the job as a correctional officer in the jail and became a parole and probation officer for a year in central Baltimore. So, as a parole and probation agent, you get much more of an opportunity to interact with these fellows and, see them where they live rather than in the structured environment of a pretty nasty jail. So how did it change my life, or how did it change my perception? Well, it really pretty much confirmed my perceptions that it's not a man's world, at least not for all men. And in some ways, it's really not a man's world for any man. I can go into that if you want me to. I generally would say that the question, is it a man's world, is a false question because the pronoun it is singular. And I believe there are two worlds, one dominated by men and one dominated by women. And certainly the one dominated by women is not dominated by men. And it's important to keep in mind that the one dominated by men is dominated by relatively few men. The standard discussion about men's issues can become kind of dismissive, with people saying, oh, what do you men have to complain about, as if you don't run the world? Look at all the men in the Fortune 500 CEO suites. They look at the top of the male hierarchy and they see men primarily in the positions of power. Well, so, okay, they're talking about the Fortune 500. I say that it's more important to talk about the misfortune 5 million. And that's who we really need to offer some attention to, some understanding, some recognition of their struggles. Yes, of course, some political philosophies and ideologies will hold that, there are a lot of men who are in jail because they're no good and they're bums and they're lazy and they don't want to work. Well, yes, that's true. It's, there are bad apples in every bunch. But most of the men that I interacted with, especially in the parole and probation office, were men who were trying to do right. They were no longer 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old knuckleheads. Most of these fellows were, in their late 20s, getting into their 30s and 40s, and they were sick and tired of being sick and tired. They recognized that they were knuckleheads as kids, and they're trying to do right. And it's not all just about living fast and having bling and chasing the girls and, all of that sort of stupid, materialistic, nonsensical stuff. These guys want to do right. They especially want to do right by their kids. And we really do not give them much of an opportunity to do that. Starting with slamming them with really unreasonable child support requirements and taking away their driver's licenses when they can't pay. And it goes downhill from there.
Well, what kind of resistance did you face when advocating for men in traditional female-dominated spaces?
Just about as bad as you can imagine in some ways. Now, there are some female-dominated spaces where there are good women who really get what's going on with men. A perfect example is a second wife, a woman who is now married to a previously divorced father. And second wives are really good allies for men who are facing troubles in the social services and social justice systems. But for the most part, it can be difficult. I would like to say this. You mentioned my book, If Men Have All the Power, How Come Women Make the Rules?
Yeah.
Yep, I wrote that book. And that book is a pretty provocative book. And I wrote it because I was feeling provocative. I had a book published in 1994 by St. Martin's Press, a big-time New York publishing house. It was called Goodwill Toward Men. And it was a book of interviews with 22 women, most of whom identified as feminists, but I hasten to add, not feminists as we typically think of them today. But in 1994, there were still a large contingent of women who insisted that they were feminists because they were in favor of eliminating sexism for both sexes. And so I did this book called Goodwill Toward Men with these women who were ready, willing, and able to talk not just about men's advantages as men, but also willing to talk about men's disadvantages as men. Secondly, they were interested, willing, and able to not just talk about women's disadvantages as women, but women's advantages as women. And so this book was essentially an attempt to bring forth the long overdue discussion of the second half of sexism, gender discrimination, and limiting people from their best selves and their best opportunities for happiness and fulfillment by virtue of their sex. So, 1994, this book is being published. Just as it's being published, the female staff, the largely female staff of St. Martin's Press, decided they didn't like my book. They weren't going to help market my book, distribute my book, get it out there. They killed my book. I was canceled in 1994 before canceling was a thing. So that was a very big hurt. It was crushingly sad because I had big hopes for this book. My editor had big hopes for this book. And instead of being known for, well, I'm not really known for anything really, but instead of my most popular book being Goodwill Toward Men, my most popular book, unfortunately, is If Men Have All the Power, How Come Women Make the Rules? And I think that's a reflection of the fact that a nice book that tries to be balanced and fair gets killed, while a snarky book, a pithy book, a wise guy book, which is, what my book was, because I wrote it as a catharsis for the sadness and hurt I was feeling on being canceled. It's regrettable that that's the book that most resonates with most men who are looking to read about what Jack Kammer has to say about male gender issues. I didn't want to write If Men Have All the Power, How Come Women Make the Rules? But I just sort of had to. It was a catharsis. And I didn't go out of my way to be mean, but I didn't go out of my way to be nice either.
How do you walk the line between advocacy and provocation in today's cancel culture climate? Because, like you said, you was canceled in 1994. So I can imagine now with everything and how cancel culture is rampant now.
Yeah. So that's a really good question, Wise, and it's very much on my mind because I have a little Substack blog, on the Substack platform, and I'm constantly going back and forth with myself about whether I should play nice and be, very reasonable, or whether I should, kick people in the butt when I think that they've had enough chance to get on the stick and do something, and they're playing it safe, and we're not going to get anywhere playing it safe because I call it big FEMA, like big pharma.
Yeah.
I call it big FEMA. Big FEMA does not want to hear that it has done pretty much a lot for women and very little for men. And in fact, nobody has done much for men in any serious way. I mean, we still look at what's going on with men in jail. We don't even ask, why are men so much more often in jail than women are? Well, if you really ask that question, people are going to look at you like, well, that's a stupid question. It's because they're men. And we all know how men are. And, men have that nasty testosterone stuff. And, it's all about toxic masculinity. And men are all about power and control and dominating and being an alpha male and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I like to say, well, if you put women into the jobs that men have been given by society, you would find that they would be doing some rather unfortunate things as well. But, life for women is very different than it is for men. And we need to do for women, we need to do for men what we've done for women. So I talked about the two worlds, the world of money and business and government and politics and science and academia and being an astronaut and an airline pilot and a soldier, whatever you want. That used to be man's domain, but we've opened it up. Sometimes at the point of a gun, practically, women demanded it. The government backed them up. And so women pretty much have equal access to the previously male domain. Well, if you look at the female domain, it's changing a little, but it's primarily changing a little only when the woman involved allows it to happen. And by that, I mean the world of women is primarily the world of relationships. And the primary relationship, the nuggets of gold in the female domain are primary relationships with your children and the ability to be expressive about your emotions and to get sympathy and empathy and help and caring and concern when you need it, which could, if delivered to men, help keep a lot of them out of jail. A lot of them are there because they never got much care or concern or help or support. And so they had to take care of business by any means necessary. You know, a man without money is in a very different situation from a woman without money.
Mm-hmm.
And so how does he become nobody? How does he stop becoming nobody? How does he stop from being regarded as less than, think of your favorite four-letter word that begins with an S and ends with a T. You know, that's how a lot of men are regarded. They ain't shit. Well, you know, they'd like to not feel like they ain't shit. In America and in most industrialized countries, how do men avoid being disposable, completely disposable and regarded as nothing? Well, they try to make some money, try to come down with some money. It's not
Well,
like that for women.
well, why do you think male-focused social work has struggled to gain legitimacy?
Male social work,
A male-focused social work, like
yeah, to
programs for
gain
male.
legitimacy.
Yeah.
Well, it's never tried for legitimacy, in my view.
Mhm.
Um, every third word out of a social worker's mouth is diversity and inclusion. Well, it's not quite uh, a word that they put into practice and action. The percentage of social work students today who are male, depending on the school you're looking at, is roughly about 12 to 15%. We wouldn't tolerate that in any other important public facing profession or occupation. We would recognize that if there is value in having women involved in building bridges and airports and dams, you know, being if there's value in women being engineers to build those structures, there is certainly value in men being social workers to help build families and communities. But does social work have a program for attracting men? Not really. Yeah, a little bit. They'll show some pictures of men on their website. But the accrediting body for schools of social work in the United States is the Council on Social Work Education. And the Council on Social Work Education every year offers a feminist scholarship award. Now, imagine if the police department every year offered a Republican scholarship award. People would scream and say, "What do you mean the Republican? The police have no business picking sides. Social work? Oh, yeah, we do. Oh, yeah, because, you know, we're women and women are full of love and we're concerned about families and parenting and the children. And so we're the mothers, and so we know best." Which is a complete violation of the principle of diversity. Women know a lot, men know a lot too. And if you want to figure out how to solve family problems and community problems, you better get some men involved and sitting at the table to develop your policies, your procedures, and your programs. It's not happening.
What's the most effective way to get institutions to take men's emotional health seriously?
What's the best way? Well, I guess I would say I don't have a master plan for this. I mean, this is a huge, huge hole we are in. And the stereotypes are very deeply entrenched. But I would say that I have seen people change when they see and really look at the fact that the way to get to men's hearts, to get to be the kind of citizens that we tell them we want them to be, but not really, the way to get to their hearts is through their children. Time and time again in my parole and probation office, my guys would say, I want to do right. I want to do better by my kids. I don't want to do to my kids what my dad did to me. And, what they are beginning to realize was that their dad didn't walk out because he wanted to. Sometimes dads would do that. But a lot of times fathers walk out because they're invited to. And often it's because they are such failures that they are embarrassed, chagrined, just want to give it up and let the woman apply for benefits if she can, or to find another man if she can. So there is a lot of pain in men around their role as fathers. There's a lot of potential love and joy in their relationships with their kids. Now, the reason I mentioned that I have seen some pretty hard-boiled people sort of soften their hearts towards men who have been in trouble. When I worked for National Fatherhood Initiative, after being a CO and after being a parole and probation agent, I got a job with National Fatherhood Initiative, which runs a really good program called InsideOut Dad. It's a program for incarcerated fathers that helps men stay in touch with their kids, to have a relationship with their kids, to have a relationship with the mothers of their kids, and to help them rebuild their relationships with their kids once they're released from prison. Now, I remember once in Indiana, it was Indiana, I was teaching a group of prison officials, mostly low-level CEOs, people whose job was to actually interface one-on-one with prisoners from time to time. And some of the young CEOs in these prisons in Indiana were kind of skeptical that this Inside Out Dad program was going to do any good. It's just some namby-pamby thing, and it's coddling these inmates. And we really should drop the hammer on them. And here we are, talking to them about being nice to their kids. Well, the older COs, the people who had been in the system longer, said, you don't get it. You don't get it. This program works. And it works not just for the dads, not just for the kids. It works for us too, us as COs, us as prison officials. Because men who have a relationship with their kids and who are looking to get out as soon as they can, they are trying to get all the good time that they can get. And it's easier for them to stay motivated in this hellhole of a prison if they know that they got somebody who loves them waiting for them and somebody that they can love back. So now, which domain does all of that belong in? You don't find a lot of love, at the top of the Fortune 500. It's very competitive, and it's, not a place where your emotions are respected and where your relationships with your kid are honored. Even paternity leave is questionable still today. But in the female domain, where I think we must work very hard to open the female domain up to men in the same way we opened the male domain up to women. So if we can connect men with the big red heart that is at the center of the female domain, we're going to solve a lot of problems. It's going to be a much happier place. Men are going to They're going to be better motivated to do right. If mothers know that men are important to their kids, scientifically proven, no doubt about it, then they will be less likely to kick the man out if he loses his job, or to tell him he's no good if he loses his job, or generally to make life miserable for him because he loses his job. She's going to say, no, these kids love that man, whether he's got a job or not. He might not have money to spend on them, but he spends time with them and cares for them. And so my effort with the little consulting agency I started was the motto, the tagline was tools and training for the social work profession to help men give and get all the love they can. And, you know, there is a lot of potential there to make life better for everybody, including mothers, if, like men had to do, they can share. We're not saying give up. We're not saying just give it to us, but share it with us. And then when we share it, it's balanced, it's healthy. I help you when you need it. You help me when I need it. And then we can have synergies. We can make things better for everybody because we're in balance. We're healthy. We're whole. We're loving each other. We're respecting each other. We're keeping our eyes on the prize, which is the health and happiness of our kids. It's a win-win-win-win-win-win-win-win-win. Unfortunately, just as there were a lot of men back in the day, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and 70s and 80s, who did not want women horning in on their professions, there are a lot of women who do not want men saying, I am your equal in parenting, and you must respect that, please. You will hear some women say, well, I'm the mother. I'm the mother, as if that's, opening and closing the case. I'm the mother, I know best. Well, yeah, you know best from the female point of view. You might not know anything from the male point of view. And since we're all about diversity and inclusion and viewpoint diversity, you really do know deep in your heart that we should also have a male perspective on this problem we're dealing with that our kids are having. And so I want to have an opportunity to pitch in how it looks to me. No, I'm the mother. And it's very difficult for public policy workers, public policy makers, to dare to say to women, women are great, but you're not perfect. And men aren't perfect, but we're great. And that, just saying that can cause a problem, can cause a fight. What do you mean women aren't perfect? Name one bad thing that we do. And it's crazy. It's crazy. A big part of it is that women will vote as a bloc. And it's because I think the female domain is much less hierarchical than the male domain. The men at the top of the Fortune 500 got very little in common with the men in the Miss Fortune 5 million. And so men don't necessarily vote as a bloc. But the female domain does not have a top. It has a center. And so virtually every woman is on the same level. It's not a skyscraper. It's not a pyramid like the male power structure. It's more like a convention center, which might have only 2 or 3 stories. But everybody in that convention center attending this convention or this exhibit or this festival or whatever it is has access to the whole place. And so there's much more communality, much more common interest. And that's why women, much more than men, will vote as a bloc. And politicians know that, and they are way upset about never doing anything to lose the women's vote. Now, that might be changing because you've been around since November when people were like, oh my God, how did the Democrats lose all these men? Well, Republicans didn't really have much to say to them other than, we see you, we know you're there, and we don't think you're complete scum. So vote for us because the other people do think you're complete scum. And that worked because men are feeling unheard, unlistened to, not included. And it's bad. It's got to change. It's got to
What
stop.
what message do you have for younger men who feel overlooked and or dismissed in today's society?
I cannot imagine what it would be like to be a 14-year-old boy today. I can't imagine. Um, what can I say to them? I can say to them, if you feel like things are not fair for you, you don't have a personal problem. You're not wrong. There are plenty of injustices that you're feeling, that you're detecting, and you don't get much encouragement to talk about these things because as soon as you do, you're going to be called a whiner, a crybaby, an incel, a misogynist, and people are going to take out their little tiny violins and play their little tiny violins for you because men have it so rough as if they don't run the world. Look at all the presidents, right? So I would say to young men, you don't have a personal problem. This is real. Summon the courage to talk with it. Talk about it, what you're feeling with your best friends, with young men that you trust, because there are some young men who will make fun of you, just like some women will make fun of you if you dare to suggest that you have any social problems or psychological problems or things that are really eating at you.
Mhm.
And I wish men today would do anything 1/10 as helpful and good as for boys as what women have done for girls. Fathers are very much missing in action. And in fact, some of the very best advocates for young boys are the mothers of the boys. It's almost as if the fathers feel like, well, if it was bad enough for me, it's bad enough for you. And they're not recognizing, well, yeah, but 25 years later, it's way worse for them than it was for you. So you're missing in action. And we need to insist by whatever means we have to say, time to start paying attention to these boys who are having a really rough time, many of whom are committing suicide. We can't just ignore this. This is real.
What would your ideal curriculum look like for training social workers on male
Man,
specific issues?
I once wrote up a curriculum. I don't know if I have it readily available, but I did keep it. It's on a document somewhere. What would it be like? Well, I think it would start off with an examination of stereotyping against women. It might sound a little counterintuitive, but I would start with talking to women about all of the stereotypes that women had to endure and overcome. Because there would be very little disagreement in the class that, of course, women suffered a lot of disadvantages by virtue of being women because of all of the stereotypes about them. Women cry too much. They're not logical. They just want to go shopping, all of those stupid things. But, get them understanding that I'm not denying that there is such a thing as sexism against women. we get that established, and then I would transition into, okay, well, now, maybe this is in the second or third week. Now, let's talk about stereotypes about men. And in the first 2 weeks, we would talk about how the stereotypes of women served to keep women in their quote unquote place. You know, a woman's place is in the home. Women aren't smart, they can't do math, they're not logical, blah, 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 blah. That's why it's perfectly justifiable to keep women out of the male domain. Well, we would talk about stereotypes against men and then talk about all of the things that men might want to do that they have difficulty doing because the stereotypes dictate that men don't really belong there. They're not really good at that. You know, I'm the mother. I create life, which is not correct at all. I'm the mother. It's in my nature to be loving and kind and nurturing and gentle and patient. And you're a man and you're a brute and you just want to drink beer and watch football and have sex with anybody that you can. And that's why. That's why. Don't talk to me about taking care of these precious little babies. You're a man. And meanwhile, these guys are like dying to take care of their precious little babies.
Yeah. Looking back, what keeps you motivated to keep speaking out despite all the pushback?
You know, it's funny, Will. I was on a podcast yesterday, and the host asked me the same question, and I just popped up with an answer that she thought was a pretty good answer because I said, I don't know. I think it's probably a combination of insanity and optimism. And I think that's it. I mean, there are really, really many times when I just say, what are you doing? Why are you devoting your entire life? And I started this in 1983. Why are you devoting your life to this thing that pays you nothing, that costs you money, and delivers very little satisfaction or feeling of accomplishment? And the reason is because I'm an optimist, because I see so many problems that could be alleviated for everybody if we would pay attention and look at what really happens in the lives of most men and boys.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh man, this has been wonderful. We've come to the part of the show where you get the solo screen and you get to plug away and let everybody know where they can find you, websites, where to get the books, everything.
Okay, thank you. All right, so my main website is malefriendlymedia.com. Malefriendly Media is all one word, no hyphen, malefriendlymedia.com. That's where I have all of my stuff. And by stuff, I mean what is called today content. Used to be called material. Now it's called content. So that's where, you know, you can find what I do. And if you want, you can subscribe to a mailing list and I'll let you know when I'm out and about and when I publish something and when I have a podcast that's been released. You know, I would love to know you're out there and interested in what I try to do.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for being a guest. I greatly appreciate you spending this time with me and and, and sharing your information and sharing what's going on out there with men's issues, especially at how even with it's funny because even with this past weekend, right, with Father's Day being this past weekend, right, um, men it was just like a regular old day for every other man. Like every man that I interact with on Sunday, it was just like a regular old day. It wasn't like anything special day. Nothing like when it's Mother's Day and you cooking her breakfast in bed and you bring her flowers and all this other stuff. It was just a regular old day for men.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got to change. Got to change.
Yeah. But
Um,
Yeah, thank you so much for being a guest.
It's my pleasure, Will. Thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, it was my honor, man. I greatly appreciate it. You're more than welcome back. I love having return guests. If you have anytime you have a program or a new book or anything, just let me know and we can have you back on to promote it and share some more stories.
Very good. Will do. Thanks. I got
Thank
an
you.
idea about something I might want to let you know about.
All
But
right.
I, I,
Thank you.
I got to get it going first.
All right, awesome. Don't leave just yet. Let me just like close up the show and I'll chat a little bit off the air with you. But thank you so much again for being such a great guest.
Thank you, Will. Take care.
All right, everybody. Another great episode is in the books. Thank you for everybody who's catching the live. Appreciate it. If you haven't, please follow the podcast. As always, big shout out to all to my Real Wise fan, Poppy J, Brandy J. Love you guys. Shout out to the boss lady. Love you and appreciate you. And as always, a big shout out to all the essential workers out there. God bless y'all. Be safe. Know your boy Wise does it. Peace out.